Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for an ePermits webinar on the contractor management imperative. I'm just going to wait another 30 seconds or so because I keep seeing names appearing on my screen of logging in. So I'll just give it another 30 seconds before I start. Okay, the numbers have stopped rolling up for the meantime, so I will get started. Again, thank you very much indeed for joining us for the webinar, the Contractor Management Imperative. Here we're going to be looking at the issues around contractor management and how systems can help support you in ensuring compliance of anybody that comes on site to do work under a permit. The use of contractors is increasing over time due to a number of factors. We've recently, or probably about a year or so ago now, had ISO 45001 extending legal responsibilities across the full supply chain now. So there is responsibility on the building owner or the building managers to ensure that everybody in the whole supply chain is performing as they should be. And there are changing working practices as well. There's more churn in the workforce. There are no longer such things as jobs for life. And increasingly people want to find an increased purpose in life and in their work. The uncertain economic climate is limiting the appetite for businesses to hire, and traditional businesses are seeing big disruptions to their businesses, the business models, online consumer outlets closing, and there's the competition and the impact of renewables on traditional services like power and energy. And again, this is limiting the desire to hire more people. In tandem with this, there are skill shortages in the traditional businesses, and that means that companies need to look for other sources of contracted labour for some specialist services. An example here shows that 36% of vacancies in 2015 went unfilled in the utilities sector. That same year, 329,000 people completed higher education, only 0.6% went to work in that sector. So we're seeing this ourselves from our own business, in that an increasing number of organisations that use FM organisations such as CBRE, Mace Macro, Mighty and so forth, and apologies to anybody on the line who works for one of those that's not on there, I do mean to include you all, and these guys are being used to manage the day-to-day maintenance repair of their clients' workplaces. Now increasingly these organisations are being asked to take on the management of all contractors, not just their own ones that they bring on site to do work, but also the ones directly contracted by the client. This is causing a big amount of pushback due to the increasing liability, the increasing risk, and the concern that the FM company has actually no idea who these contractors are, whether they are properly qualified and trained to do the work that they're being asked to do. However, there are commercial pressures to take on this extra workload, and these often outweigh the potential risk and liability consequences in the eyes of decision makers, not necessarily in the eyes of the health and safety and compliance people. So these conflicts are growing between commercial and health and safety within these FM organisations. And it's how do we bring a balance to that? How can we still ensure the health and safety and compliance is met, but still ensure that FM companies can take on the additional responsibilities and additional liabilities and risks that they're being asked to do? There are some key issues that need to be resolved in this, and this will hopefully balance out that equation. The entire business and its supply chain should have a single compliant management process. That's what everybody asks for. It's nothing new. It's what everybody wants. But it's hard bringing those two things together when you have the client and you have the FM with inherently different processes they need to rationalize. All contractors, whether they're from the FM or the client, they have to adhere to the same management process without exception, or there can be big issues. If you have one person working for one group and another one working for another group, and neither knows about the other's activities, and any clashes are not identified to the organisation, there can be a major risk to the health, safety, and even the lives of the people involved in doing that work. So this involves change management, and this is the biggest challenge in any business. Clients have to understand that devolving responsibility to the FM company involves more than just saying, that's what your contract says. They have to share the responsibility and be prepared to share some of the elements of the cost so that change management will bring to the FM and the entire FM supply chain. How can this be done? This needs to be done by bringing contract management under a single process that can be demonstrated to both the client and the FM as being fully compliant with all health and safety regulations. So contractor management, how do you get it right? It's actually very simple. You need to make sure that the right people with the right training and competency and the right contractor with the right insurances and certifications are doing the right job at the right time, at the right place, and have the right RAMs to conduct work safely. Nothing new in that. This is what everybody needs to have. The issue is, how do you control and manage all of these things to ensure that the work can get done? The right people. Are these people the ones that turn up to do the job, the people specified on the permit to work? I'm sure many of you will have had experiences of having a certain person or more than one person due to turn up for a job, and just due to legitimate things like sickness or whatever, that those people are not the ones that turn up. There's someone new on the team. How do you know that that new person is properly trained and qualified to do the work on site that day? If they're not properly trained and qualified, you're at risk. Have you got the time, once they've turned up, knowing that the job is urgent and needs to be done, to actually go through the process of digging into your filing cabinets and your record systems to see if this new person is A, a valid person to be working for you, and B, has all the proper training and competency? Often not. Often there's a dilemma. Do we just say, go, and hope nothing happens? Or do you actually take this time and run the risk of the job not getting done on time and then getting the recompense for that? What about the right training and competency? Are these people properly trained and certified? Is it current, and have they been inducted on the site? Is the contractor company the right one specified on the permit to work? Or have they sent a subcontractor to do that work but they hadn't notified you in the first place? And are the right insurances in place for the people who have turned up? Do they have the level of the public liability, professional indemnity, etc., to conduct the work on the site, and are they all current? With regard to the job, have they actually turned up to do the job specified on the permit to work? Again, there are experiences in the past where people turn up to do a work and say, well, while we're here, we're just going to go and do this other job as well. Sounds like a good idea, but again, you've got no idea what the implications of doing that work might be. Any other work that might be taking place at the same time on that same piece of equipment or in that same location. What are the risks involved in allowing people to do more than just what's specified on that job sheet? Have they turned up to work at the right time specified and the right place? Are they in the right location to do the work, or are they wandering around elsewhere where they shouldn't be located? So they need to be specifying what position, what place they're going to be working in and what time they're going to be doing the job. And are the RAMs correct for the job to be done in that location? Do RAMs exist? Have you approved them? And are they adequate to cover the work that you want done? So we're going to have a very brief, quick look at how e-permits can actually manage all of these elements and ensure that things are compliant. So I'm going to run some very simple scenarios that will allow us to show exactly what e-permits can do to manage that whole front-end process. So I'm going to run a very simple scenario. I'm just going to do the front-end part of the permit process. So I'm a contractor. I've been asked to come in and do some work for an organization. So I'm going to fill in a simple permit request that involves 6 questions: what, where, why, when, how, and who. And once I've done that, the system will actually show that it ensures compliance before I can even submit such a permit request. So I'm a contractor. I'm a company called Specialist Contractor, and I'm going to create a permit request for one of the clients that I'm working for. So first of all, which client am I coming to work for? I'm going to come for work this one called data centers and offices. And am I coming into work for them directly, or am I coming into work for the FM company? This goes back to the original question that I asked, that if you have got a client company that has their own contractors that they bring on site, and if you have the FM company that brings their contractors on site, there may well be a different approvals process required. So if a client is bringing a contractor on site, that may only require the approval of the FM from a point of allowing them on site, having checked that where they're going and what they're doing. If they're coming on board for the FM company, it may only just need to be visible to the owner, to the client company, to see what's happening at the same place at the same time. So I'm coming into work for the FM company, and now I'm into my 6 simple questions. So I've been given a work order number, which I can now fill in on the sheet. This is my contractor company. This is me, specialist contractor. And I'm now going to select a competent person. We'll look at the way the data structure is held in a moment, but these are the only people in my company that have been deemed as a competent person. So I'm going to send this chap called Steve Chandler, and I'm going to send this chap called Richard De Silva on site as well to do the job. If necessary, I can add additional information like vehicle registration numbers if that's critical. Let's say I'm going to come in and do the work tomorrow. I start at 9. I'll finish on the same day, and I'll finish at 4:30. So that's the team I'm sending and when I'm intending to do the work. Now I'm actually going to specify the type of work that I'm going to do. So I've been asked to come in and weld a panel onto the AC heating unit. So I'm coming into work on the AC heating unit. I'm going to be doing some repair work. And now the system understands that air conditioning heating units only exist in these 3 locations in the building. So I'm coming into work in the roof upper level. I'm going to be, well, I'll specify what I want to do in here. And I'm coming in because it's actually a services fault. So there's a problem that I need to remedy. Notice here I need to select some RAMs. These are the only 2 RAMs in the system that actually exist for work in this location on this particular piece of equipment. If I had reversed everything back to 0, you'll notice that I have got a whole tranche of RAMs. These are all the RAMs that I've submitted to the organization, to this FM company in the past, and all of these have been approved. If I start selecting this, you'll notice that they do reduce down, as I pointed out earlier on. And now, as I start doing this, it's cutting down the number of RAMs in this area. So these are the only RAMs now that are applicable to working in the roof upper level on AC heating to do welding. So I've got welding and I've got condenser replacements. So these are the only 2 RAMs that are applicable. These are the correct ones that I want to select. And now here are my special risks. So I know I'm going to be doing welding and brazing, and I'm also working at height. So having completed the what, where, why, and how, and previously having done the who and the when, I'm now able to move on and look to submit this permit request. At the bottom here, you'll notice I've actually got a grey button. So at the moment, I can't submit this request until all errors in red have been cleared. So I've got some non-compliances in this area. Let me point out some of the different ones that come up. So if we look in this top panel, you'll notice here that it states that the public liability cover must be at least £100,000 to work at this site. That is something that you, the client or the FM, will have specified in the data setup. And at the moment, Specialist Contractor doesn't have the level of cover required to do the work. Now, this is a green warning. Green warnings do not prevent me submitting the permit requests, but it does alert the contractor that they need to update their information, and at the very least, actually bring it with them to the site when they conduct work. So all the way through the process, when a permit is submitted, the approvers will see this notification that the public liability cover is not enough. And even if it comes to the point of issuing the permit, a warning will again come up as you try to do the issue process that says, have you checked that the public liability now meets requirements? If the answer is no, you cannot submit that permit request because it is non-compliant. But all the way up to the point of issue, you're given the option to do that. Similarly, you'll notice that this guy's site induction has expired. So Richard De Silva is no longer valid in an induction process for this site. It might mean he's never taken it, or it might mean that the time has expired and it needs to be redone. So again, this is a green warning. It won't prevent me submitting that permit request, but it will insist all the way through that process to the approvers this person needs inducting. And also, it will insist at the point of issue of the permit, has this person been inducted? And you have to answer in the affirmative in order to proceed with the permit issue. Now, we do have within the system, if I just pull up another screen, there is the ability to actually embed induction videos within the system. So as a contractor, if I'm not inducted, as Richard De Silva, I could come in now and I could watch your health and safety video. Behind that video, there may be a nest of 50 questions. The system will randomly pick 10. I need to answer 9. You need to answer 9 correctly out of 10 in order to be inducted. So I can do that induction online through the system, but obviously not at your place of work and not delaying the start of the work that needs to be done. So we can cover that off that way. But if you have other induction processes that you need to handle, you've got to go through those processes before this person can actually start work on the site. We've also got amber warnings. There is a key in the system where you can specify the lead time on permit requests that is required prior to a job being started. Now, these are amber warnings. My rule in my system says that I need to allow 3 days prior to work starting for me to submit a permit request. And this is warning me that it's insufficient time. So as an approver, when I receive this request, I will see that warning and I can decide whether or not I want that work to take place or not. If a specialist contractor consistently submits permit requests within the time frame and you're not comfortable with that, you can reject that permit. But you may look at that permit and say, actually, if they can come in and do this work tomorrow, that would be great. So yes, I'm going to approve that permit. But it will require everybody in the approval chain to approve that permit request. If any one person says, no, I'm not comfortable, then the permit is rejected. The key ones that were actually delaying the submission, though, are these ones here. You must have 2 persons trained in hot works, and everybody in the team must be trained in working at height. Again, these are rules in the data system where you set them as minimum requirements for any particular specialist type of work that's going to be done. So I can look at that team, and if I take this chap out because I know that he has no training at all, and I put someone in that I know is properly trained, I can now move on through the system in exactly the same way, and now I actually have a red button. So this permit request is now compliant within the constraints that we mentioned about the insufficient lead time and the fact that the contractor will need to produce evidence that their liability insurance has been increased to work at that site, either increased or renewed. It could have been that it's gone out of date, as I mentioned earlier on. So here's my permit request. I know now it's compliant. I have the ability now to start putting in what PPE that I'm going to bring. Now, this may be specified in the RAMs. It may be specified by you. But for site access, I'm going to need, for example, safety boots, a helmet, and a high-vis jacket. And for doing the welding and brazing, I'm going to need gauntlets and visors. Work at height, I'm using ladders. If ladders were actually in the system, I haven't put ladders in my little database, but I can select ladders there. And it can even go down to a point where you may be specifying certain pieces of equipment that have to be used. So I've now specified what it's going to be. I'm now able to submit that permit request. And my permit request says I'm going to come on site between 9 and 4:30. I'm going to be working at height between let's say 10 and 4, and I can specify the time that I'm going to do my hot works. So I'm obviously doing it on that one day. I'll do the hot works. I'm planning to do the hot works between 12 and 1. The system understands Firewatch, so if I'd set the permit hot works to finish at the same time as the permit, or or let's say at 3:30 rather than 4:30, and the Firewatch period is 2 hours, again, I won't be able to submit that request because it won't meet the requirements of that permit. So I can now submit that permit request, and I've now got some permit requests out there awaiting approval. So I'll show you the end where it appears for approval in a moment, but what I want to go through first is actually show you where that data is held so that we can actually see what constraints are in place and how we would need to improve it. If we look at the company administration, this is where information about the company is logged. So if I find specialist contractor, and there was a list of all the contractors that can work on the site, this now shows me information about that company. And here in the insurances, I can see that I've actually only got £10,000 of product and public liability cover. So that needs to be increased. So if I increase that now to 120, let's say, 1.2 million, I can update the date that that's due to expire, and I can now upload a certificate as well. So I can just go to my database, find the certificate that matches that, and upload that information. So that can now be viewed by the company that I'm coming in to do the work for to check that everything is now compliant. So if I ran that permit request again, I would now get a notification that my insurances are now up to date. Similarly, if we look at the individual people within that organization, if I look at the users, I can look at, for example, Frederick, the guy that we were talking about, and I can see here now that there's various bits of information pertinent to his job. There's his mobile numbers. This will appear on a permit request. And I can also now look at things such as the competencies. This is where competency information is held. Frederick is deemed as a competent person, and I can upload any certificate or notification to that effect as well, so it can be spot checked by the organization that I'm coming in to do the work for. If I'm an apprentice, I can tag that. If I'm a first aider or I've got police clearance, again, you can put dates into the boxes. And once you put dates into them, it will then fire off any expiry dates. So if I said I'm trained in hot works and the date I gained this was, let's say, 1st of February, I can put in qualifications, certificate numbers, whether I'm experienced. Yes, I am experienced. And again, I can upload certificates to monitor that. So this will also now track any hotworks training. If it's only valid for the period of 1 year, my hotworks training will expire after a certain amount of time. Various other things are held in here, like national security vetted, police clearance, CRB checks, whatever they're called these days, passport scheme numbers. I also have a log of the different inductions. So these are the 4 sites that I'm actually, as an individual, allowed to access. And it shows me where I've been inducted. So Frederick has been inducted on data centers and offices in that demo. His induction was in January, so it's valid for 1 year, and any certificate again can be uploaded. So that's why Frederick passed that particular test. If we go to look at Richard De Silva, you'll notice that his competencies and in his inductions, he has no inductions. Or it's 2016 for data centers and offices. That little circle there is saying that I actually haven't uploaded any file against this. So the induction has expired. It was for a period of 1 year, 2 years, whatever your requirements are. It has expired, and I haven't actually uploaded any certificate to go along with that. We have worker height, and these days worker height is anything over 1 inch. So there are different levels of training in work at height, and you can again input there the date that a qualification is gained in either general working at height, steps and ladders, mutes, scaffolds and towers, etc., and also cradles, and cradles are site specific. You again input qualification, the certificate numbers, and the as whether that person is experienced or not. Same for high voltage, and the same for any asbestos activities. Asbestos is a module within e-permits. If there are asbestos on site, we can log where asbestos is located within the system. And then again, as I'm doing my permit requesting, it will identify whether or not there is asbestos in the area I'm going to, and will flag up warnings and ask whether or not I'm going to be disturbing any asbestos in the activities. If I'm going to disturb asbestos, then A, the company itself needs to be an asbestos registered company, and B, any individuals that come on site have to have the appropriate training to handle asbestos. The asbestos module is provided at no cost within e-permits. It's a vital piece of health and safety that we deem is important enough that we actually roll this in. So if you have asbestos, it makes no difference to the cost of your system. So that's shown you where all the data is logged and how it picked up and logged that information. Just to show you now the start of the back end of the process, if I'm logging in now as someone from that FM company, I will now have those permit requests that I've submitted sitting here waiting in my requests awaiting approval bucket. Increase the size. So if I go to my requests awaiting approval, here I have the information about the permits that I was generated. I've got an access permit, a work at height permit, and a hot works permit. And as an approver, I can now go in and I can view these different permits. So this is the information that you get at your end of the process. First of all, there's still the warning about the public liability cover. Although I reset it in the system, I didn't go through that permit and resubmit it. And here it's warning me about the insufficient lead times. An important piece of information is the clashes. It's actually going to show me 3 types of potential clashes for the scheduling of this work. It'll show me location clashes. So have I got different jobs taking place in the same location at the same time? Have I got different service clashes, i.e. different people working on the same piece of kit at the same time? Or are there any dependent service clashes? Simplistically, does someone need the water on and someone need the water off? With this information, you can actually review the different permits for the other submissions, and you can have knowledgeable conversations then with your internal team to decide whether or not you're prepared to have the 2 jobs take place at the same time, and whether you want to add any specific additional warnings on the permits, or whether one of them has to be bounced. Once the decision has been made to bounce a permit, the permit can then be rejected at the bottom. You can select the reason, and you have to put information about why that reason has been rejected. At that point, it then comes back to me, the contractor, to say, Richard, sorry, your permit request has been rejected. We've got something else happening on at the same time. We need to reschedule. And also, there's another warning that will also appear on the permit, should the permit document go through the process and it hasn't been updated yet, that when it comes to the point of issue, all the way through it will note that approved subject to the following insurance cover being in place. When you get to the issue process, it will again warn the person that's going to issue, has the insurance been checked? There are other things on here, so you can see again the information about the lead time and so forth. This talks about the work, what's going to be done. I now have the ability to review those RAMs, so I could look at those RAMs documents and just do a double check before I approve it as to whether or not these RAMs are suitable for the job. I can also bring into play any isolations that I think we may require. So, for example, if I want to bring in a fire systems isolation, it pops up a window where it says, okay, who's going to do the isolation? It's going to be me, FM company. The company who's going to do it will again be FM company. It can be the contractor, it could be another one. And I can now select the operators that are actually going to do the work. When's it going to be isolated? You fill that in. What service is going to be isolated? I can put in, for example, LV small power. I don't have any RAMs for LV small power. Look at LV distribution boards. I have now got things in here for LV isolated distribution boards. So on the ACT heating, this is specifically what I'm going to isolate. And now I've got information down here where I can specify. These are user configurable, so I can specify different activities here that I want tagged off, so that when we go through the approval and issue process, I can check that these things have been done. And these fields can be yes, no answers, yes, no, not applicable, text fields, whatever. So they're specified to meet whatever you want to meet. So if I go through the process now, I'm able to approve that permit. I'm able now to put in my password, which now audit trails it to me, and that has now been approved. So you can now see that permit has now been through the approval process. The same will be done for work at height. And for example, in the hotworks side of it, I could only bring in, for example, a fire systems isolation for doing hotworks. So again, everybody in that process has the ability to bring in anything that's pertinent to the job that's going to be done. This is a safety checklist, so these are specifically the safety checklists that I want to see on the permit document that before work starts need to be checked off. I can check the personal protective equipment, and I could, for example, add other things in here. So I want a harness. So when I approve this, when this comes back to the contractor, it will identify that there's been a change in the PPE list, and I now need to bring a harness with me as well to do the job. So that basically takes you through that process. It brings up all of those particular issues. As I say, everything right up to the point of issue can be edited. Even when work started, you can still add isolations into a job. I've started something, I've come across a problem, I need something isolated, so I can just now carry on with the work that's necessary. So all the way through the process, you're able to ensure that these things are done, and that the people that are doing each job, whether it's a last-minute isolation or whether it's the initial job, are all properly trained and qualified to do the work. So this is how e-permits resolves that issue of the contractor conundrum. How do we make sure that everybody that's on site is properly trained and qualified to do the work? So if there are any questions, by all means, you can either put them onto an email and send them to me at the address shown on the screen. If you have anything urgent now, there is a chat box in the little panel that you have for attending the webinar. You can put a chat question in there. I have a colleague, Neil Hartley, on the line at the moment, who can then go through and filter any of those and pass any questions on to me. So does anybody have any questions at all?
Nothing at the moment, Richard.
Okay. Just so everyone's aware, the webinar is recorded, and this session will then be made available to all attendees and those people that were unable to attend today as well, as they registered. And it will also then be available in future on our Insights page for anybody to have access to and download. So in the absence of any questions, thank you very much indeed for your time. I hope that you found it interesting. I do apologise that it was cancelled from a couple of weeks ago, but as you can hear, I'm still suffering a bit from a cold, and I couldn't actually speak 2 weeks ago when it was originally planned. So I do apologise for that, but hopefully you've enjoyed the session today. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Goodbye.